Can you imagine a day so ordinary, so bathed in the soft glow of a Carolina sun, turning into a nightmare in the blink of an eye? It was just another afternoon, the kind where the breeze hums through the pine trees, whispering promises of peace, and the sky stretches wide, endless, like a canvas of hope. But for Celeste Monroe, a pregnant black woman with dreams cradled in her heart, that day would become a scar she'd carry forever. What happened on that sidewalk wasn't just a moment, it was a thunderclap, a brutal act that shook a city to its core. And trust me, you're going to want to hold on tight, because this story? It doesn't unravel the way you expect. Picture Celeste, 8 months pregnant, her steps slow and deliberate, each one a quiet vow to the life kicking inside her. She'd just finished her shift at the public library, her hands busy with a small paper bag of oranges she'd grabbed on her way home. Can you see her? One hand resting on her round belly, the other clutching those oranges, her mind already painting a picture of the evening ahead. She was going to surprise her husband, Gavin, with his favorite dinner, chicken and dumplings, just like his mama used to make. Oh, how she smiled to herself, imagining his tired face lighting up as she set the steaming bowl in front of him. For that fleeting moment, the world felt kind, like it was holding its breath to let her dream. But how quickly that moment shattered. As Celeste crossed the corner of 4th and Walnut, a police cruiser slunk into view, its engine growling low, like a predator sizing up its prey. Did she even notice it at first? Maybe not, until it screeched to a stop, tires biting the pavement. Her heart must have skipped. Why was it stopping for her? The driver's door flung open, and out stepped Officer Rick Donnelly, a towering figure with skin as pale as his crisp uniform. His name was one whispered in barbershops, passed in hushed tones over kitchen tables. He was the kind of cop you prayed wouldn't notice you. But today, oh today, Celeste had caught his eye, and there was no escaping the storm that followed.
Ma'am, stop right there.
His voice sliced through the air, sharp and cold, like a blade aimed at a suspect, not a woman carrying a child. Celeste froze, her breath catching in her throat. Can you feel her confusion, her sudden fear? I'm just walking home, she said, her voice soft, calm, trying so hard not to provoke. She'd been taught that lesson, hadn't she?
Keep your eyes down, don't challenge, juste survive.
But Donnelly didn't care. He strode toward her, his presence heavy, menacing, like she was some kind of threat.
You look like you're loitering, standing around.
That's suspicious, he snapped, his hand hovering near his holster, as if her very existence was a crime. Celeste's hand flew to her belly, feeling that tiny kick, her baby sensing the danger.
Sir, I'm not loitering.
I'm just trying to get home, she said, her voice steady but low, pleading for reason. Don't get smart with me, lady, he barked, stepping closer, his eyes burning with something ugly. I said, stop moving.
You hear me.
But she wasn't moving. Her body was rigid, her breath shallow, every muscle tensed with that bone-deep fear that comes from knowing the world might not see you as human. I'm not arguing, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please. That single word, please, how could it ignite such rage in him? Without warning, he shoved her hard, his hand slamming into her like she was nothing. Celeste stumbled, her feet slipping on the uneven sidewalk, the oranges tumbling from her bag, rolling across the concrete like scattered dreams. She fell, her hands flying to her belly to protect the life inside her. The pain was instant, sharp, a knife twisting in her core. But it didn't end there, oh God, it didn't end. Donnelly stepped forward, his face twisted with anger, and in one brutal senseless act, he kicked her, right in the stomach, where her unborn child lay. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final, a sickening thud that echoed in the silence. Her scream tore through the air, a cry of pain and disbelief that shattered the quiet like thunder across a clear sky. She collapsed, crumpled on the pavement, her hands wrapped around her belly, her eyes wide with terror. Could her baby still be alive? She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only pray, her heart screaming for her child as the world spun around her. Bystanders stood frozen, their voices caught in their throats. Some shouted, their cries mingling with the chaos. A few fumbled for their phones, capturing the horror unfolding before them. But no one stepped in, no one dared. One woman's voice broke through, desperate. Call 911.
She's pregnant.
Oh my God. But Donnelly? He just turned his back, as if nothing had happened, as if Celeste's life, her baby's life, meant nothing. To him, maybe they didn't. But the cameras were rolling, weren't they? The eyes of a neighborhood, shocked and heartbroken, were watching, recording every second of this brutality. This wasn't a misunderstanding, not some officer just doing his job. This was violence, raw, ugly, racial, the kind that can't hide behind excuses anymore. And as the ambulance sped Celeste to the hospital, her body trembling, her mind clinging to one name, Gavin, something was stirring, a fire that would burn brighter than anyone could imagine. Gavin Monroe, can you picture him? A man who'd served his country, a Marine who ran a counseling center for veterans just blocks away. When his phone rang, when he heard the nurse's voice saying, "Your wife is in critical condition. She's asking for you," his world stopped. He didn't know how he made it to New Hanover Regional, only that he ran red lights, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his heart pounding with a dread he'd never known. She was kicked in the stomach by a cop. Those words, how could they be real? They hit him like a freight train, threatening to break the man who'd faced war but never this kind of battle. The hospital lights were blinding, the air thick with antiseptic and silence, except for the buzzing in Gavin's ears. His boots slammed against the tile, louder than he meant, but he didn't care. He nearly crashed into a nurse pushing a crash cart, her voice calling after him, "Room 403." His legs moved faster than his thoughts, driven by a desperate need to see her, to know she was still there. When he stepped into that room, time stopped. Celeste lay there, pale against the hospital sheets, her face bruised, her lips split. The monitors beeped, a steady rhythm, but it was her belly, the rise and fall of it, that Gavin locked onto. She was alive. Their baby was still with her for now. Oh, thank God for now. Baby. His voice cracked, so small it didn't sound like his own.
Can you hear the pain in it? The fear?
Celeste turned her head slow, her swollen eyes finding his. "I'm okay," she whispered, "but then he kicked me, Gavin."
Et kicked-me.
Those words, they weren't just words, they were a wound, tearing through him. His knees buckled, and he grabbed the bed to keep from falling. For a moment the Marine was gone, no toughness, no armor, just a husband, a father-to-be, staring at the woman he loved, broken because someone saw her as less than human. He took her hand so gently, feeling it tremble in his. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him.
He got you.
But oh, something was breaking, something old, something quiet, something dangerous, waking up in his soul. The doctor came in, a short man with gray hair, his tone clipped as he explained, blunt force trauma, a steady heartbeat for the baby, but they were watching for placental abruption, oxygen, blood supply, stress. Gavin nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the dark bruise spreading across Celeste's stomach, a cruel mark under her gown. The doctor promised they'd monitor her overnight, adding, "She's strong." Strong? Oh, Celeste was stronger than anyone knew. She was the one who filled their home with books and laughter, who brewed tea with honey when Gavin's nightmares came, who volunteered at the community center even when her feet ached. She fought with love, with grace, and now someone had tried to shatter that. "What did he say to you?" Gavin asked, his voice low, barely holding back the rage. Celeste's eyes clouded, her voice trembling. "He accused me of loitering. I told him I was just going home. I didn't yell, Gavin, I swear I didn't even raise my voice." "I know you didn't," he said, his jaw clenching, his heart breaking for her. She paused, her voice cracking. "When I fell, I felt the baby kick, after. That's how I knew we were okay. But Gavin, it hurt so much, and I couldn't do anything. I just lay there while people filmed it. No one stopped him."
Gavin swallowed hard, fighting the urge to scream, to punch the wall, to tear the world apart.
But Celeste didn't need his anger, she needed his calm, his presence. So he pulled a chair close, laced his fingers with hers, and kissed her hand, his lips lingering on her skin. "We're going to fix this," he vowed, his voice steady with purpose. "He doesn't get to walk away." Celeste closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek.
"Please don't do anything reckless, Gavin."
"I won't," he said, but oh, that was a lie, wasn't it? Because inside, a fire was burning, one that wouldn't be quenched until justice was served. Outside that hospital room, the world was waking up, and fast. The video of the incident, less than 40 seconds of pure horror, was spreading like wildfire across the internet. A bystander had posted it, their caption a cry for justice. "He kicked a pregnant woman like she was trash. Say her name, Celeste Monroe." By the time Gavin stepped out to catch his breath, The video had 20,000 shares. By midnight, 3 million views. Can you imagine the outrage, the heartbreak rippling through every screen? The footage was brutal, unmistakable, no shaky camera, no room for doubt. Just a man in uniform shouting, shoving, kicking, and Celeste hitting the ground, her arms wrapped around her unborn child, her cry piercing the air. The sound of her body striking the pavement? It was seared into the minds of everyone who watched, a sound you couldn't unhear. People weren't just angry, they were furious, and not just online. Outside the hospital, candles began to appear on the steps, first a handful, then dozens. By dawn, nearly 200 people had gathered, church elders with gray hair, retired teachers with weary eyes, war veterans standing tall. They weren't shouting, no, they were standing, holding signs that screamed what their voices didn't: justice for Celeste. Our daughters are not threats. Can you feel the weight of their presence, the quiet power of their resolve? Gavin stood at the third-floor window, watching the vigil grow, his heart swelling with something new. This wasn't just about Celeste anymore, was it? It was about every woman like her, every mother, every black family who'd ever felt crushed by a system that refused to see their humanity. And as he watched those candles flicker in the dawn light, a fire lit inside him, one that could not be extinguished. This wasn't just a tragedy. This was the beginning of a fight that would shake Wilmington to its core, a fight Gavin Monroe was ready to lead. For Celeste, for their baby, for every soul who'd been silenced too long. Oh, this was only the start. Can you feel the weight of that moment, standing at a hospital window, watching a vigil grow for the woman you love? Gavin Monroe stood there, his heart a tangle of grief and resolve, as a nurse approached, her steps soft against the sterile floor. "That your wife?" she asked, nodding toward the flickering candles below, where strangers gathered in solidarity. "Yes, ma'am," Gavin replied, his voice steady but heavy, carrying the burden of a man who'd seen too much. The nurse's face softened, her eyes warm with empathy. "She's brave. You both are." Gavin managed a tight smile, but oh, how his heart ached. "We don't want to be brave," he said, his words sharp with truth. "We just want to be safe." Safe, such a simple word, yet so far out of reach. The nurse nodded, saying nothing more. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes, a quiet acknowledgement of the injustice that had brought them here. That night, sleep was a stranger to Gavin. He sat in a stiff hospital chair beside Celeste, his eyes tracing the steady rise and fall of her chest. Her hand rested on her belly, never straying, as if guarding the life within. She whispered to their unborn child, soft promises that broke Gavin's heart. Can you imagine the love in those whispers, the strength it took to hope after such horror? He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the video, the one that had turned their world upside down. He watched it not once, not twice, but over and over, each viewing carving a deeper wound. The twitch in Officer Donnelly's jaw, the way Celeste's hands flew to protect their baby, the faces of the bystanders, not fear, not outrage, but resignation, as if they'd seen this cruelty before. How could they look so defeated, so used to this pain? Gavin's fingers moved on instinct, texting Marcus Price, a friend and attorney he'd served with overseas. 3 years had passed since they last spoke, but this wasn't a moment for hesitation. "Need your help. Civil rights case. No one's going to sweep this under the rug," he typed, his resolve burning through the words. 30 seconds later, Marcus replied, "I'm in. What happened?" Gavin's response was a single searing sentence: "A cop kicked my pregnant wife in the stomach. And the whole damn world saw it." Can you feel the rage in those words, the raw determination to make this right? He looked at Celeste, now sleeping peacefully, her face softened by the dim hospital light. But Gavin couldn't shake the image seared into his mind. Celeste on that pavement, her scream echoing, her tears falling, the helpless way she looked up as the ambulance arrived. He reached out, his hand gently brushing her hair, his touch a vow. "You rest now," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You got us this far, but tomorrow's mine." Because Gavin Monroe wasn't going to beg for justice. Oh no, he was going to seize it with both hands. The hospital cafeteria was a ghost town when Gavin finally sat down, his coffee cooling untouched in its cup. He stared out the window, the early morning fog curling around the trees like a shroud. Sleep hadn't come. How could it, after what he'd seen, what had been done to her? The calm in him wasn't natural, was it? It was forged, honed in the fires of Afghanistan, where emotions could mean death. Back then, he'd learned to breathe differently, to store rage like fuel, to act only when it counted. Gavin Monroe had mastered patience in chaos, but now that patience was being tested on a battlefield he never expected. Celeste was still upstairs, sleeping, her strength a quiet miracle. The doctor had said the baby's heartbeat was steady, thank God. But they'd monitor them for another 24 hours. That small piece of good news was a lifeline, yet Gavin felt a storm brewing under his skin, a fury he could barely contain. He reached into his jacket, pulling out his phone, the screen glowing with notifications, calls, texts, messages from voices long silent. His cousin in Detroit sent a link to the video, now viral. A pastor in Florida had shared it, his caption a rallying cry, "Protect black mothers at all costs." An old army buddy in Arizona texted, "Let me know how to help, brother. We ride at dawn, if you say the word." Their support was a spark, but Gavin didn't need an army, not yet. What he needed was precision, a plan as sharp as a blade. He opened his contacts, found M. Price, and hit call. Marcus Price, his old squad leader, now a civil rights attorney in D.C., answered with a voice that felt like home. "You okay, man?" he asked, concern cutting through the years of silence. "No," Gavin said, his voice raw but focused. "But I'm ready." He laid it out, the short, bitter truth. Celeste, the officer, the kick, the baby, the footage, the deafening silence from the police department. Every word tasted like ash, but he spoke them, unflinching. Marcus listened, never interrupting, his silence a promise of action. When Gavin finished, there was a pause, heavy with purpose. "We're not going through the front door," Marcus said at last. "We're crashing through the roof. I'll get my team together, start drafting. You gather every eyewitness, every second of footage. And Gavin," Marcus added, his voice firm, "don't let them twist her into a suspect, you hear me? She's not a footnote in this story." Gavin's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles whitening. "She's the headline," he declared, his voice a vow. He hung up, staring at the cafeteria wall, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. Slowly, he stood and walked to the window, watching the first light creep across the parking lot. More people were gathering now, their candles glowing like stars, their signs bold with truth. Some prayed, their heads bowed, others sat in silence, their presence louder than any shout. Who were these strangers, standing for Celeste, for their baby, for justice? Gavin didn't know them, but their resolve fueled his own. Justice wasn't a gift to be given, it demanded strategy, and he was ready to wage that war. Back in Celeste's room, he found her awake, her face still swollen but her eyes clearer, stronger, like the dawn breaking through the fog. She gave him a tired smile, one that pierced his heart. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said, her voice soft but teasing. "Feels like it," he replied, his tone gentle, masking the storm within. She reached for his hand, her touch grounding him. "You don't have to fix everything overnight, Gavin." "I know," he said, but oh, how could he sit still? "I can't just wait, Celeste." He pulled a chair close, his voice low as he shared his plan. Attorneys, public pressure, press conferences, accountability. Celeste listened, her nods slow but deliberate, her hand resting on her stomach, cradling their future. When he finished, she whispered, "Good. Because I don't want our baby born into a world where this is normal." Can you hear the strength in her words, the quiet fire of a mother determined to change the future? Gavin nodded, his heart swelling. "Neither do I." Celeste took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything," he said, his voice fierce with love. "Don't lose yourself in the fire," she pleaded, her gaze searching his soul. Gavin squeezed her hand, his touch a lifeline. "I won't. I just need to make sure he knows, they know, they kicked the wrong woman." His words were a battle cry, a promise to fight for her, for their child, for every soul crushed by this broken system. Outside, reporters were gathering, cameras slung over shoulders, microphones clipped to lapels, all hungry for a statement. But Gavin wasn't ready, not yet. When he spoke, it would be with purpose, not just for Celeste, but for every woman pushed, silenced, or bruised by a system that saw them as less. Oh, he'd make sure the world heard her name. By nightfall, his plan was set. He texted Marcus, "We go public tomorrow. First light. I'll handle the face. You handle the fire." Then he turned off his phone, the silence a canvas for his resolve. In the stillness of that hospital room, with the monitors humming softly, Gavin looked at his wife. Broken, yes, but still whole, still breathing, still here. He sat beside her, holding her hand in both of his, and whispered not just promises, but intentions, fierce and unyielding. They tried to knock her down, but now? Now it was Gavin's turn to stand tall. Morning came heavy, the air thick with the weight of what had happened, like fog that refused to lift. Can you feel it, that oppressive stillness? The sun shone, but it couldn't pierce the sorrow hanging over the hospital. Outside, the crowd had doubled, then tripled, in less than a day. By the time Gavin stepped out, over 300 people stood together, on the sidewalk, on the lawn, under the shade of ancient oak trees, their signs a silent roar, justice for Celeste. Black Mothers Matter. She was just walking home. Who were these people, coming from across town, from Raleigh, Durham, even Virginia? Elderly couples with weathered hands, veterans leaning on canes, mothers pushing strollers, students with backpacks and camera phones, all united by one truth. They'd seen the video, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, with curly hair and eyes fierce with purpose, handed Gavin a microphone. "They're waiting," she said, her voice steady. "We don't need perfect words. We just need yours." Gavin looked at the crowd, then at the mic, his heart pounding. For the first time in days he, a man of few words, spoke with his whole chest. "My name is Gavin Monroe," he began, his voice low but clear, cutting through the morning air. "And the woman you saw on the pavement, the one who got kicked in the stomach for walking while pregnant, that's my wife." A hush fell, so deep even the cars slowed, as if the world held its breath. "Her name is Celeste. And that baby you saw her protect with her own body, that's our child. We've been planning for that life, reading baby books, arguing over names. I watched her decorate a nursery with her bare hands and a swollen belly. And yesterday, a man with a badge tried to take all that away." His voice tightened, raw with pain. Because she didn't look like someone who belonged. Because she was there. He looked out at them, the elderly black woman wiping tears, the young white couple holding a sign, "Protect, don't punish." "We're not asking for special treatment," he continued. "We're not asking for revenge. We're asking for what anyone would want, what's right, what's decent, what's just." The crowd clapped, slow at first, then swelling like a heartbeat. Gavin raised a hand, silencing them. "I served this country," he declared. "I bled for it overseas. And now I'm watching the woman I love bleed here, in my own backyard. And I'm telling you now, I won't let it slide. We won't let it slide." That was the moment everything changed. The clip of Gavin's speech, raw and unfiltered, hit the internet within the hour, spreading like wildfire, just like Celeste's video. But this time it didn't end in silence. It ended in applause, in resolve, in something rare, a man speaking not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever watched a loved one broken by injustice. By noon, news vans rolled in from Charlotte, D.C., then CNN. Local officials scrambled, caught off guard by the rising tide. The police department's response? A bland statement that stung like a slap. "We are aware of the incident and have placed Officer Donnelly on administrative leave pending review." Administrative leave? Celeste lay in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors, wincing with every laugh, while the man who'd attacked her was paid to sit at home. How could they call that justice? Gavin didn't wait for the city to act. He called Marcus. "They're stonewalling," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "We need pressure, not just legal, public." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Let's call the press conference." And just like that, Gavin was back in front of the cameras, this time with Rosa Fields, a civil rights attorney whose sharp eyes could dismantle entire departments with one deposition. They stood at a podium outside the hospital, helicopters buzzing overhead, the crowd's energy electric. Can you feel the momentum building, the world finally listening to Celeste's story? Can you feel the electricity in the air, the raw power of a community rising up? There, in front of the hospital steps, with helicopters buzzing like angry hornets overhead, Rosa Fields stood tall, her sharp eyes blazing with purpose. She laid it all bare, didn't she? A formal complaint had been filed, a civil lawsuit was barreling down the tracks, and the charges? Oh, they were heavy: excessive force, civil rights violations, reckless endangerment of an unborn child, failure to de-escalate. And that was just the start. "We're not only going to hold Officer Donnelly accountable," Rosa declared, her voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. "We're going to rip back the curtain on every supervisor who turned a blind eye, every complaint they buried, every silence that let this happen." Can you imagine the weight of those words, the promise of a reckoning? Gavin stepped up beside her, his presence a quiet storm. This time, his voice was steadier, sharper, not raw with fresh wounds but honed with focus. "We're not going away," he said, his words simple but unyielding. "So, either this city steps up and delivers justice, or we'll bring it ourselves." Oh, how the crowd roared, their cheers a tidal wave of support. Reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs popped like fireworks, but Gavin? He'd said enough. His words were a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge to a system that had failed his wife, his child, his family. Later that evening, back in the quiet of Celeste's hospital room, Gavin sat by her side, scrolling through his phone, the glow illuminating his tired face. The headlines were everywhere, weren't they? "Veteran husband of assaulted pregnant woman speaks out. Calls for accountability shake Wilmington Police Department. Justice for Celeste, the movement grows." Each one was a spark, fueling the fire within him. He looked up, catching Celeste's gaze, and saw her faint smile, a flicker of light in the darkness. "You always hated the spotlight," she said, her voice soft, teasing despite the pain. "I still do," Gavin replied, his tone heavy with truth. "But I hate what they did to you even more." Can you feel the love in those words, the fierce resolve to fight for her? Celeste reached out, her hand trembling as it touched his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude, "for fighting." "I'm just getting started," he vowed, and oh, he meant every syllable. What began on that Wilmington sidewalk wasn't just about one cop or one family anymore. It was about the country their child would grow up in, about the countless voices too afraid to speak, about a silence that had suffocated justice for far too long. Gavin wasn't just speaking now, he was leading, and the world was finally listening. They thought he'd back off, didn't they? That after the cameras faded, the applause died down, and the crowds went home, Gavin Monroe would sit quietly, waiting for the city to respond, for the process to crawl along, for justice to trickle in. Oh, how little they knew him. On the third day after the assault, Gavin strode through the front doors of City Hall, his steps echoing with purpose. No press, no entourage. Just him, a man on a mission, with a folder tucked under his arm. That folder? It held everything he and Marcus had unearthed in 48 relentless hours. Every complaint filed against Officer Rick Donnelly, every internal memo conveniently lost, and most damning, the names of those who'd signed off on the cover-ups. Can you imagine the weight of that evidence, the truth he carried like a weapon? He was ushered into the mayor's office, a sterile glass-walled room that reeked of coffee and caution. Mayor Eileen Harper sat at the head of the table, flanked by Police Chief Alan Moreland and 2 city attorneys, their notepads ready, their jaws tight. They expected anger, didn't they? Someone loud, easy to dismiss. But Gavin? He was a force they hadn't prepared for, a man armed with facts and fury. "Mr. Monroe," the mayor began, her nod polite but guarded, "we want to express our deepest sympathy for your wife and your unborn child. What happened to Celeste is deeply troubling." Gavin didn't sit. He set the folder on the table, his eyes locking onto Harper's. "Troubling is when the internet's down," he snapped, his voice flat but searing. "What happened to my wife was a felony." Can you hear the steel in his tone, the refusal to let them minimize her pain? The mayor blinked, caught off guard. Chief Moreland shifted, his discomfort plain. "I understand emotions are running high," he said, trying to steer the room back to his control. "But we're conducting an internal review. Officer Donnelly's on administrative leave. Paid administrative leave." Gavin cut in, his voice like a whip. "He's sitting at home on my tax dollars, while my wife can't roll over in bed without crying out." Oh, how that truth stung, didn't it? Moreland opened his mouth, but Gavin raised a hand, silencing him. "I didn't come here for apologies. I came with receipts." He opened the folder, sliding a copy of Donnelly's disciplinary history across the table. 3 prior excessive force complaints, 2 against black women, all dismissed without follow-up. Can you feel the weight of that evidence, the proof of a system's failure? Harper's eyes dropped to the paper, her composure faltering. "Some of these incidents predate my administration." But not his badge. Gavin shot back, his words a blade cutting through excuses. One of the attorneys leaned forward, her voice measured. Mr. Monroe, we're not disputing the situation's seriousness, but cases like these take time. There's a process. There's always a process. Gavin said, his voice cold, unyielding. And it always moves slower for people who look like me. Meanwhile, my wife was kicked in the stomach while carrying our child, and the man who did it is protected by your process. So I'm here to tell you, plain and simple, we're done waiting. The silence that followed was deafening, wasn't it? A moment where the truth hung heavy, undeniable. Mayor Harper leaned back, her fingers steepled, her mind racing. What exactly are you asking for? She asked, her voice cautious. Suspension without pay. Gavin said, his demands clear as day. Immediate. Followed by criminal charges. And I want every officer who buried those complaints investigated for negligence. Moreland scoffed, trying to hide it with a cough. Gavin's eyes snapped to him. Something funny, Chief? Moreland adjusted his tie, flustered. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Gavin retorted. Do your damn job. Oh, how those words landed, a challenge to their inaction. The room fell silent again, the air thick with tension. Gavin saw it in their eyes, the calculations, the political risks, the fear of fallout. Harper spoke at last. Give us until tomorrow. We'll need to review these documents in full. Gavin nodded, his gaze unwavering. You have 24 hours. After that, I go public with everything. Full transparency. Names included. He didn't slam the door as he left. He didn't need to. His impact was already seismic, wasn't it? Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Gavin stood on the sidewalk, drawing a deep breath, his hand steady, his mind clearer than it had been in days. Yelling wasn't enough. Marching wasn't enough. You had to walk into their halls, sit at their tables, speak their language, and then burn their excuses to the ground. Back at the hospital, Celeste was resting, a nurse having braided her hair, fresh flowers brightening the room. Gavin kissed her forehead, his touch gentle as he sat beside her. How'd it go? She asked, her eyes half open, her voice soft with hope. Gavin exhaled, a slow release of tension. They weren't ready, but they heard me. She nodded, her eyes closing again, trust in him absolute. Gavin took her hand, holding it tightly, staying there in silence, a sentinel by her side. That night, he updated Marcus and Rosa, the plan solidifying like steel. They'd hit from every angle, legal, political, public. No one could pretend this didn't happen. No more hiding behind badges or bureaucracy. Gavin wasn't just fighting for Celeste now, he was coming for the whole rotten system. It started with a single folder, a few pages of names, dates, complaints, all pointing to Officer Rick Donnelly. But within days, that folder grew into a binder, then a box, then an entire table in Rosa Fields' law office, buried under documents that screamed a truth no one in power wanted exposed. This wasn't just about Donnelly. He wasn't a lone bad apple, not an outlier. He was part of a deeper, darker culture, one that had shielded men like him for years. Gavin, Rosa, Marcus, and a growing team of advocates were peeling back the layers, exposing the rot. They began with public complaints, 3 against Donnelly in 5 years, 2 involving excessive force against black residents. 1 was dismissed before a formal review, the others? Closed for insufficient evidence. But what Rosa's team uncovered next? Oh, it changed everything. Internal memos, handwritten notes from supervisors raising red flags, emails from junior officers reporting Donnelly's behavior, training evaluations calling him aggressive, disrespectful, one even stating, not suited for fieldwork. Every single one ignored. And those were just the documents the department didn't bother to hide. Late one evening, Rosa pulled Gavin aside in her office, her face grave. She slid a manila envelope across the desk. You need to see this, she said, her voice low but urgent. Inside were anonymous statements from active Wilmington officers, men and women who'd seen Donnelly harass, threaten, and intimidate residents, especially in black neighborhoods. They spoke of a wall of silence, of complaints rewritten or buried. One officer wrote, I've watched Donnelly throw people to the ground for backtalking. I filed a report once. It disappeared. Can you feel the betrayal in those words? The complicity of a system that failed? Gavin sat back, the papers trembling in his hands. They knew, he said, his voice a mix of shock and fury. They all knew, and they protected him. Rosa nodded, her eyes fierce. Which means they're just as guilty. The next day, Marcus called, his voice crackling with urgency. Their research team had dug into similar cases statewide, officers with repeated complaints, quietly reassigned or sent to training until the heat died down. It's a pattern, Marcus said over the phone. Not just Wilmington, this is a statewide infection, and the cover-up's bigger than we thought. Gavin stood in the hospital hallway, rain streaking the window like tears. How far does it go? He asked, his voice low, dreading the answer. Marcus paused, then said, far enough that if we go after this, really go after it, we won't just take down Donnelly. We'll expose the entire command chain. Gavin didn't flinch. Then we go after it, he declared, his resolve unshakable. Back at the hospital, Celeste was growing stronger, her bruises fading, the baby's heartbeat steady, a miracle amidst the pain. Nurses were cautiously optimistic, but Celeste still flinched at loud knocks, froze when uniforms passed her door. That evening, she sat with Gavin, her hand resting on his, her touch a quiet anchor. He told her everything, the other victims, the buried reports, the officers silenced for speaking out. Celeste was quiet for a long time, her eyes distant. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but piercing. So we weren't the first? No, Gavin said, his heart aching. But we're going to be the last. That weekend, Rosa organized a town hall at a community center, expecting a small crowd. But it became a standing room-only event. People came forward, one by one, their stories pouring out like a dam bursting. An elderly man, Mr. Whitaker, recalled being stopped at gunpoint walking home from church decades ago. A young mother shared how her teenage son was slammed against a police car for wearing a hoodie in the rain. A retired schoolteacher whispered, "We stopped reporting." What was the point? Can you hear the pain in their voices, the years of silence finally breaking free? Can you hear the stories breaking free, pouring out like water from a shattered dam, each one a cry for justice that had been silenced for too long? In that crowded community center, Gavin Monroe sat, his heart heavy, listening to every word, every trembling voice. An elderly man's memory of a gunpoint stop, a mother's pain over her son's humiliation, a schoolteacher's quiet resignation. Each story was a wound, and Gavin felt them all. This wasn't just about Celeste anymore, was it? It was bigger than him, bigger than their family. It always had been, a fight for every soul crushed by a system that turned a blind eye. Oh, how those voices fueled his resolve, pushing him to fight harder. By Monday morning, the city's leaders couldn't hide from the storm any longer. Protesters marched, their footsteps thundering outside City Hall and the police precinct, a united front demanding change. Faith leaders stood tall in their pulpits, their sermons ringing with calls for justice. A petition demanding Officer Rick Donnelly's firing and prosecution soared past 100,000 signatures. Can you imagine the power of that number, the collective roar of a community fed up? The mayor's office tried to quell the fire with another statement. "We are taking these concerns seriously and have launched an independent review into Officer Donnelly's history." But to Gavin, to the people standing with him, that was a hollow promise, wasn't it? It wasn't enough, not by a long shot. So that very afternoon, Rosa Fields and Marcus Price took the stage at a press conference, the air crackling with anticipation. Rosa stepped to the microphone, a thick folder in her hand, her eyes blazing with purpose. "This isn't just about one bad officer," she declared, her voice a clarion call. "This is a network of negligence, a culture that protects those who abuse power, a pattern of silence from those sworn to uphold justice." She dropped the folder onto the podium with a thud that echoed like a gavel, a sound that said, "We're done with your excuses. We have evidence," she continued. "We have names. And if the city won't act, we will." Can you feel the weight of that moment, the promise of accountability? The media pounced, headlines erupting like fireworks. Local anchors couldn't utter Wilmington without corruption trailing close behind. National outlets dove back into the story, amplifying the cry for justice. Civil rights groups reached out to Rosa, offering support, their voices joining the chorus. Gavin's phone buzzed non-stop, messages pouring in from every corner. Yet through it all he stayed steady, not vengeful, not bitter, but focused, a man driven by purpose. They were building something monumental, weren't they? A movement, a reckoning, one that wouldn't be ignored. Gavin wasn't just Celeste's husband anymore, he was a threat to the system itself. He wasn't after revenge, oh no, he was demanding responsibility, and he wouldn't stop until it was delivered. They thought the worst was over, didn't they? That with Donnelly suspended, the city under pressure, and the protests still peaceful, the anger would fizzle out. They thought people would move on, distracted by the next trending story, the next headline. But they were wrong. Gavin wouldn't let this fade, not for a second. Every step he took was louder, every speech he gave reached further, his voice carrying the weight of countless others. Videos of him standing beside Rosa at town halls, in church basements, on courthouse steps, they spread like wildfire, didn't they? Each one drew more voices, more support, a growing tide of people ready to stand up. But with that attention came those who wanted him silenced. It started with whispers, anonymous messages slithering into his inbox, calls with no one on the other end, chilling in their silence. Then came the online campaigns, fake profiles smearing his name, accusing him of exaggerating Celeste's trauma, of using her pain for fame, even suggesting, can you believe it? That she hadn't been kicked at all. The video was clear, the world had seen it, yet this was how the system fought back, wasn't it? When it couldn't silence the truth, it twisted it, tried to paint the victim as uncertain, the oppressor as misunderstood. But Gavin? He saw it coming, and he didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in harder, his resolve unshakable. He met with local black-owned media, speaking directly to communities the mainstream press often overlooked. He went on public radio, sat for interviews in barbershops and college classrooms, his voice steady, powerful. He wasn't just answering questions, he was shaping the narrative, taking control. Everywhere he went, he reminded them, this isn't just about Celeste.
This is about you, your keys, your sisters, your mother.
This is about a system that's been allowed to run without breaks for too damn long. Can you hear the fire in his words, the call to action? But the more Gavin pushed, the more the city pushed back, didn't it? The police union issued a statement defending Donnelly's record, calling the public's reaction an overcorrection, labeling Gavin's efforts a distraction from due process. They even claimed calls for reform were dangerous rhetoric that puts officers at risk. Can you imagine the audacity, trying to make accountability sound like hostility? It was a desperate attempt to muddy the waters, to dodge the truth. Yet Gavin refused to play defense. Oh, he stayed on offense. He met with state legislators, his voice carrying weight in their chambers. He joined virtual town halls with mayors from neighboring cities, all watching the case unfold, knowing it could happen in their backyards. Civil rights organizations from across the country reached out, some offering legal aid, others funding, others simply saying, keep going, Gavin. We've got your back. Their support was a lifeline, wasn't it? But not everyone was cheering. One night, as Gavin left a meeting with Rosa and Marcus, he found a note slipped under his windshield wiper, its words chilling, back down or we'll bury you in something deeper than paperwork. No name, no signature, just a threat, the same kind black men had faced for generations, now cloaked in modern venom. Gavin held the paper, his heart pounding, then folded it and tucked it into his coat pocket. Did it scare him? Maybe for a moment, but the next day, he stood in front of the precinct, Celeste by his side, and spoke louder than ever. I've gotten threats, he declared, his voice unwavering. I've seen the lies, read the comments. But here's the thing, they don't scare me. Because what they're really afraid of is us, not me us. People who aren't afraid to speak up anymore, who know how to organize, who are tired of waiting for a justice that only shows up when it's convenient. Can you feel the power in that defiance, the strength of a man who refused to bow? His voice didn't tremble, not even when the power at his veterans center mysteriously cut out the next day, or when building inspectors appeared, citing code violations never mentioned before. It was pressure pure and simple, from a machine desperate to protect itself. But Gavin? He'd faced pressure before, in war zones, in boot camps, in hospital rooms watching Celeste fight for life. Pressure didn't break him, it sharpened him, made him clearer, stronger. While Rosa's legal team finalized the lawsuit, Gavin worked with community organizers to create something lasting. The Celeste Act, a policy proposal to mandate independent oversight boards for police complaints, require body camera footage released within 48 hours of use-of-force incidents, and strip immunity from repeat offenders. He wasn't just reacting anymore, was he? He was building something to outlast him, something to protect others. The public rallied behind it, their voices loud, but City Hall? Oh, they weren't so thrilled. The mayor requested another closed-door meeting, and Gavin agreed, but this time, he brought Marcus and a Wilmington Times reporter. Transparency wasn't optional anymore, was it? The courtroom was packed again on sentencing day, the air thick with tension. Donnelly was brought in, no uniform, no badge, just a gray suit and shackles at his ankles, a man stripped of his power. Gavin didn't flinch at the sight of him, and neither did Celeste. She was stronger now, her bruises faded, but the memory of that kick lingered behind her eyes, making her tense when tires screeched or uniforms raised their voices. But today she wasn't hiding, she was facing him head high. Can you imagine her courage, standing tall against the man who'd tried to break her? The judge entered, and everyone rose, then sat, the silence deafening. Victim impact statements came first, Celeste's, her words a quiet fire, her OBGYNs, detailing the near tragedy, and a third from a woman whose complaint against Donnelly 2 years prior had been buried, ignored. Now, her voice was heard, wasn't it? Then the judge spoke, his gaze fixed on Donnelly. "Officer Donnelly," he said, his voice heavy with authority, "you violated the oath meant to protect this city. You didn't make a split-second mistake, you made choices."
You chose agression, violence, silence after the harm.
Gavin's heart pounded, each word a hammer striking the truth. "Given the nature of your actions," the judge continued, "this court sentences you to 5 years in prison. You'll be stripped of your law enforcement certification, your pension forfeited, and you'll be ineligible for parole."
Nos cheers followed, nos célébrations, juste à stillness, à moment of reckoning.
Celeste reached for Gavin's hand, her whisper soft but profound, "It's over." But Gavin shook his head gently. "It's just beginning." Because accountability was only the first step, healing, oh, that would take time, wouldn't it? That evening, they walked out of the courthouse into a swarm of cameras, reporters clamoring for their next move. Gavin paused, turning to Celeste, letting her take the lead. Her voice was soft but steady, a beacon in the chaos. "I didn't think I'd ever see this day," she said. "I didn't think people like me would get justice in rooms like this. But today we did, and I hope, God, I hope, it opens the door for the next person, and the one after that." They didn't linger, their message had landed, powerful and clear. In the days that followed, letters flooded in, emails, messages from strangers, some saying thank you, others sharing their own stories, some simply whispering, "I see you." But there were others, weren't there? Veiled warnings, anonymous threats, voices angry that Gavin and Celeste hadn't stayed silent, that they dared to challenge a system bigger than themselves, and won. But Gavin didn't bow to fear, he answered to purpose. He spent weeks speaking at community forums, joining policy meetings, sitting with families of other victims, knowing more battles loomed, more truths waited to be dragged into the light. Something had shifted, hadn't it? They weren't alone anymore. Back home, another shift was unfolding. Celeste went into labor. On a quiet Sunday morning, Gavin helped her into the car, no protests or cameras this time, just a husband and wife breathing through pain and hope, ready to welcome new life into a world they'd fought to change. Labor was long, grueling, and Celeste was exhausted, but Gavin never left her side, holding her hand, whispering through each contraction, reminding her to breathe, reminding her of her strength. When their son arrived, crying and perfect, Gavin felt his heart crack open, all the rage, pressure, and pain softening in the face of this miracle. He held his son, tears streaming down his face. "He's here," he whispered. "We made it." They named him Justice, not for what they'd won, but for what they'd never stop fighting for. In the weeks that followed, Gavin and Celeste stayed quiet, not retreating but building, laying the foundation for something lasting. With Rosa and Marcus, they formed the Monroe Initiative for Police Accountability, a nonprofit to provide legal aid, community-led policies, and trauma counseling, something Gavin knew too many went without. It wasn't just an office or a website, was it? It was a promise that Celeste's pain wouldn't be just a moment, it would spark a movement. A month later, they held their first community meeting, and over 400 people showed up, locals, travelers from across state lines, all there to listen. Gavin stood at the front, a microphone in hand, his sleeping son strapped to his chest. "This isn't just about what happened to us," he said, his voice steady, powerful. "It's about what's been happening for too long. But something changed when y'all showed up, stood beside us, believed this story was worth fighting for. He paused, gazing at his son, then back at the crowd. And now we fight for him, for all of them. The room erupted, rising to their feet, their applause a thunder of solidarity. Celeste stood nearby, smiling, seeing Gavin not just as her husband but as a man who'd found his purpose, not in rage or revenge, but in building something to outlive the pain. They'd walked through fire, hadn't they? Now, they were lighting torches for others to follow. A year passed, 12 months since that sidewalk nightmare, since a cruiser screeched to a halt, since words became threats, since a kick nearly stole everything. Yet here they were, not broken, not bitter, but changed, hardened in some ways, softer in others, still standing, still building. Wilmington's air felt different now, didn't it? Not quieter, but more alert, more aware, with new voices rising where silence once reigned, new eyes watching where injustice once slipped by. At the heart of that shift stood Gavin and Celeste, no longer just survivors. They were builders, architects of change. The Monroe Initiative had grown from a dream into a thriving foundation, its office buzzing with life, volunteers, attorneys, counselors, students, all united for justice. A wall by the front desk overflowed with handwritten notes, photos, names, some victories, some stories still waiting, all reminders of why they began. But Gavin's favorite part? Oh, it wasn't the wall, it was the people who walked in nervous, unsure if their story mattered, only to leave transformed after a conversation, a coffee, a moment with someone who listened, who believed them. Can you see the hope in that, the power of being seen? Can you imagine the strength it took for Celeste Monroe to rise from her pain and turn it into a beacon of hope? After surviving that brutal attack, she didn't just heal, she ignited a mission. She threw herself into maternal health advocacy, her heart set on protecting other black women from the dangers she'd faced, dangers no one warns you about, dangers the system too often sweeps under the rug. Partnering with clinics, doulas, and midwives, she built outreach programs to ensure expectant mothers got the support she was denied that fateful day. Oh, how she told her story, not to relive the trauma, but to transform it, to light a path for others. Can you feel the power in her resolve, the love driving her to make a difference? One crisp morning, in the dim glow of a church basement, Celeste sat surrounded by teenage girls, young, scared, some pregnant, others just lost, unsure of what lay ahead. Her voice, soft yet commanding, filled the room without ever rising. Honestly, she began, her words wrapping around them like a warm embrace, I was lucky. I survived.
My baby survived.
But I shouldn't have had to fight so hard just to make it home. Can you hear the weight of that truth, the quiet strength in her confession? One girl, her eyes brimming with tears, leaned forward and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Celeste's gentle smile was a lifeline. "That's why I'm here," she said, her voice steady, "so you don't give up either." Oh, what a moment, a spark of hope kindled in those young hearts. Meanwhile, their son Justice was growing faster than the spring grass. Barely a year old, he was already walking, bold, barefoot, always on the move, with Celeste's soulful eyes and Gavin's quiet, unyielding strength. Everyone who met him felt it, didn't they? There's something in that boy, they'd say, like he's already watching the world. And maybe he was. Even at one, Justice seemed to sense when a room needed calm, when a stranger needed a hug, when his parents just needed him to be a child. Free, safe, unafraid. Can you picture him, toddling with such purpose, a tiny beacon of joy in a world they were fighting to make better? On Justice's first birthday, the Monroes threw a block party that was so much more than a celebration of their son. It was a triumph over the storm that had tried to break them. Neighbors brought steaming dishes, families arrived with kids in tow, and local musicians filled the air with jazz and gospel, their notes dancing under strings of twinkling lights. Rosa raised a glass in a heartfelt toast, Marcus tended sizzling ribs on the grill, and even a few city officials showed up, not for a photo op, but to stand humbly in the crowd listening, learning. Celeste cradled Justice in her arms as Gavin took the microphone, his presence commanding yet warm. "I've spent the last year learning that justice isn't a destination," he said, his voice resonating with hard-earned wisdom. "It's a practice, a choice you make every day, especially when it's easier to walk away." He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd before resting on his wife and son. "We didn't ask for this fight, but now that we're in it, we're not leaving. Not until every family feels safe walking their own street, until every child knows their name matters, their life matters, their truth will be heard." The applause wasn't a roar, it was steady, honest, like the foundation they'd built together. Can you feel the unity in that moment, the shared commitment to a better future? Later, as the party hummed with life, Gavin stood at the edge, watching people dance, laugh, and hold hands under the starlit sky. For the first time in so long, he let himself breathe, really breathe, the weight of the past year easing just a little. Celeste joined him, leaning her head against his shoulder, her presence a quiet anchor. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft with love. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Yeah, I think I am." They stood there, no words needed, just the warmth of their shared presence, a moment of peace amidst the fight. Oh, how precious that stillness must have felt. Weeks turned to months, and the Monroe Initiative grew like a mighty oak, its roots spreading deep. They helped pass a bill mandating body camera footage be released within 10 days of any civilian injury, a victory for transparency. They fought to exonerate a wrongfully arrested teenager in Fayetteville, giving him back his future. They trained dozens of young leaders, teaching them how to file complaints, speak at council meetings, and organize their neighborhoods, empowering a new generation to demand change. They never forgot why it all began, did they? And neither did Wilmington, the city forever marked by their courage. One crisp fall afternoon, Gavin was invited to speak at a law enforcement training conference. Some warned him against it. "It's a trap," they said. "That room won't want you there." But Gavin went anyway, didn't he? Not to accuse, but to challenge, to confront without hate, his heart set on planting seeds of change. Standing before 100 officers, cadets and trainers, he spoke with quiet power. "You don't have to be the enemy," he said, his voice steady, piercing. "But you do have to be honest about what's broken, what's been allowed, who pays the price when silence wins." Some squirmed, some nodded, some looked away, but one older officer stood out. He raised his hand, cleared his throat, and said, "Mr. Monroe, I don't agree with everything, but I heard you. And I think that's where it starts." Gavin hadn't expected that, but oh, he welcomed it. Progress, real progress, wasn't about instant agreement, was it? It was about momentum, about planting something for others to nurture later. And that's what Gavin and Celeste had done, hadn't they? Through pain, pressure, fear, resistance, and exhaustion, they'd planted something unshakable, rooted in truth. Standing hand in hand, watching justice take wobbly steps across the grass toward laughing children, they knew it deep in their bones. They hadn't just survived the system, they'd reshaped it. Somewhere down the road, maybe years from now, when another soul stands up, demands change, refuses to be silenced, they'll do it because someone paved the way, someone kicked open the door, someone named Celeste, someone named Gavin, someone named Justice. Can you see that future, bright with possibility because of their courage? Sometimes, justice doesn't come when it should, does it? Sometimes, those who suffer most are the ones taught to stay silent, to endure, to not make waves, to just survive. But this story, oh, it's a reminder that there comes a moment when silence grows too heavy to bear. In that moment, we choose between fear and legacy, and what did Gavin and Celeste choose? They showed us that one voice, spoken with love, courage, and conviction, can move mountains. They turned pain into purpose, stood tall not for the spotlight, but for their son and every child after, to inherit a fairer world. For those who've lived through decades of struggle, progress, and setbacks, their story is a call. Aren't we all called to stand for what's right, no matter our age? To lead the next generation by example, to show them what's possible? If this story stirs your heart, if you believe in the power of truth, family, and justice, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. We're honored to have you here, part of this journey toward a better tomorrow. The story of Celeste and Gavin Monroe is a heart-wrenching yet inspiring testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love and courage. My heart aches for Celeste, who endured unimaginable trauma, her body and soul battered by an act of senseless brutality. Yet, I'm in awe of her strength, how she rose from that pain to become a beacon for Black mothers, turning her suffering into a mission to protect others. Can you imagine the bravery it took to speak her truth, to face those who tried to silence her, and to advocate for a safer world for her son, Justice? Gavin's unwavering resolve moves me deeply. His pain as a husband and father-to-be, watching his wife and unborn child nearly destroyed, could have broken him. Instead, it forged a leader, didn't it? His refusal to accept half measures, his bold confrontations with power, and his vision for systemic change through the Monroe Initiative, it's nothing short of heroic. Their son, Justice, embodies their legacy, a living reminder that even in darkness, hope can thrive. This story stirs both sorrow and pride in me. It's a painful reminder of the injustices Black families face, the silence that too often smothers their cries. But oh, how it uplifts to see Celeste and Gavin reshape that pain into purpose, planting seeds of change that will bloom for generations. Their fight for a world where every child knows their name matters is a call to us all. I'm humbled by their courage and inspired to believe that one voice, fueled by love and conviction, can indeed move mountains. Their legacy, carried in Justice's tiny steps, is a powerful beacon of hope.